confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Bartholomew, a.k.a. Barty, says, Father Simon Confessional Collective. My story goes back to 1983. Great year of music. Manchester United winning the FA Cup and me turning 16. These are obviously important things as far as he's concerned. I live in the lovely countryside of mid Wales, and so being Welsh, let's call me Barty, which is okay because that's my name.
Okay. It is his name, is it?
No.
Oh, right.
I had a twin. I always change everything as far as I can.
That Welsh name.
Yeah,
that famous Welsh name.
Yeah, loads of Bartys. I had a twin sister, Marie. Not really. Also 16, but not identical. I actually have had people said, oh, you got a twin sister, are you identical? Funnily enough, we're not. And an older sister called Karen, who was 18. And we all lived at home with Mum and Dad. I was working full-time on a farm, and both my sisters were working full-time for local banks. On the day of this story, my mum and dad were both overseas on holiday, and it was just us three kids living at home and managing ourselves. It was great. Went to bed when we wanted, tea when we wanted it, we were eating when we wanted, drink what we want, hang our clothes on the floor where we want. We were living the dream. You can't actually hang clothes on the floor, it seems to be. But anyway, Barty. Our parents' instructions before they left were the typical sets of rules set by parents when leaving, i.e. don't make a mess, don't have a house party, don't drink too much, and don't oversleep and be late for work. Well, I thought the first three rules can all be broken and fixed before they get back, and really, how likely is it that I would oversleep? Well, it turned out that was extremely likely, because that's what I did. On the morning in question, a beautiful sunny summer's morning, I had indeed slept in too long. By the time I realised my sisters were both at work, which is where I should have been an hour ago. Apparently my boss, Farmer Jones, had been, had been calling to see where I was. I was ashamed and knew I'd be in big trouble with Farmer Jones and also my parents if they found out. I rushed to get ready and easily found my boiler suit, which was still on the floor from the night before, just inside the back door where I left them. Next on, my green wellies, which were lying on the floor outside the back door where I'd pulled them off in the night. As I put on my wellies, I had that annoying sensation of realising a sock was still in my wellie from the day before. But as I was late, I decided I would sort it out later. It was really uncomfortable as my toes were being squished up and my wellies were a tad on the small size anyway. But I had no time to sort this out. In the scheme of things, it was not important. I think all wellie wearers have done this if they're honest enough to admit it. Anyway, the next part of the saga was for me to hop onto my push bike, pedal frantically the 3 miles to the farm. As I cycled, I tried to think of an excuse that was believable. Then, bingo, I had the perfect plan. I would cycle to within 200 yards of the farm, and before the last bend, I would let all the air out of my tyre and say I had a puncture.
Wow.
I would say I had to push my bike all the way, all 3 miles, and that's why I was late. So that's exactly what I did. I was met at the gate by Farmer Jones, who was grumpy at the best of times. The image of him stood at the gate made my heart sink, and I thought, he's going to twig, he's going to twig. What time do you call this? He said, being from mid Wales.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Where have you been? What time do you want me to... What do you want me to tell the cows this morning when you were not here to sort them?
Dear, oh dear.
Anyway, I started to waffle and I pointed at my flat tyre. You know, I've only got 3. Pointed at my flat tyre and explained it had gone down and I had to push it to work. Luckily, he believed me and I set about my duties. I worked really hard, Father Simon. I worked all day. I mean, imagine that, having to work all day.
Wow.
I wasn't looking forward to my 3-mile walk home with my bike, and my foot with the sock in the welly was so uncomfortable. And I thought, it's been there all day. I'll sort it out when I get home. So I left the farm pushing my bike the 3 miles, which took me nearly 2 hours. I got to the back door. I sat on the step, totally drained from the day of stress of working all day.
Yeah, no, we get
I stood up and I pulled off my first welly, which was a lovely feeling. I then pulled my other leg up and leant back against the house wall and tried to pull off my second welly with the sock in. And it had sweated so much, it was like a vacuum, and I couldn't get it off. I was aching and tired, and I tried a second time to get this uncomfortable welly off my foot. I leant back against the wall, and with an almighty pull, I whipped my welly off, and out fell my old sock. Well, my heart almost stopped, and then felt like it was going to explode as I looked at the old sock, which actually wasn't an old sock, but was actually a large, dead frog. Oh, and the key change and everything! How about that? Been doing it for 9 months, and eventually I get the right cue.
Oh, well done. Well done.
I screamed at the top of my voice in shock and horror as I stared at this upside-down large dead frog which had been in my welly all day. That frog had clearly decided to make a new home in my Wellington boot the night before, thinking this is a nice safe haven, because that's what frogs think.
Yes.
And then ended up being part of my frantic 3-mile cycle, 200-yard run, day's work, and then my 3-mile walk home. I'd always been scared of frogs. I wouldn't have touched one for 100 quid. Now realising one had been in my welly all day made me heave. Unnecessary detail. I could have taken that bit out.
Yeah, probably.
I asked for forgiveness, not from Farmer Jones for limiting the amount of truth I gave him, or my sisters, who I blame for not waking me on time, but I asked for forgiveness from the frog that I accidentally and tragically killed in my welly, probably with my little toes as I pushed in the first time. Anyway, it's been on my mind for 38 years. But now with this story read, I hope to feel more at ease with these tragic events. Please, Simon and the lovely team and listeners, please find it in your hearts to forgive my sock error of judgment. Oh, nice. Sorry, a little bit of a World Service music fade there.
Wasn't
it? Just for a moment. Did anyone notice the difference?
No.
I hate the earlier music cue. It was fine. Sister Susie.
Barty, I just can't forgive you because you should have taken the time. You should have realised as soon as you put your foot in that welly when you thought, oh, there's my old sock. You should have dealt with it then, and maybe the frog might be still alive.
Yes.
Maybe.
Probably not. I'm going to say, I'm not a vet, but,
well,
probably not.
I'm not going to forgive him.
You're not going to forgive Brother Matthew.
So there are a couple of things going against Barty here. Number one, who leaves the Wellington boots outside? No one does, because, they're going to get filled with rain. So you don't leave your boots outside. Number two, who takes 2 hours to walk 3 miles? What are you doing? Backwards, Barty? Doesn't make any sense. However, just because of the key change...
Yes.
You're getting forgiven.
Backwards Barty is an interesting one.
Barty.
Anyway, it's the people's verdict, please. On the text, it's down to you, really. 61054. Merely moments ago, Barty sent in it was sort of a farming-related confession, but it basically all boiled down to the fact that he thought that was a loose sock at the end of his boot when it turned out to be a dead frog. Well, whether it was dead beforehand,
who knows?
It certainly was by the end. Anyway, the people's verdict is in, and here it is.
So Lynn says, forgiven. I've grabbed muddy trainers left at the back door, flung them into the washing machine, and only found the frog that thought it had found a new home once the complete wash was finished. Sorry to all frogs. Forgiven, says Jules in Birmingham. Is there any chance that the frog could have been dead already? In which case, there's nothing to forgive. Jared, definitely forgiven. We have a field behind our house, and when it's harvest time, it's not uncommon to find mice in our wellies. We first found out when one of my daughters was 3. She luckily found it quite funny. We all now check our wellies. And finally, absolutely forgiven, says Brooke in Blackpool. Laughed so much that I ended up with a frog in my throat. Lying to his boss was a sheep trick, but that frog should have hot-footed it out of that welly before it got footed. Doesn't work at the end, but well done anyway,
Can
Brock.
I just tackle one of those with whoever it was who said, could the frog have been dead beforehand?
Yes.
Well, it's unlikely. It would have crawled it, I suppose.
I mean, who knows? The frog might have, been on the way off.
On the way. I'm going to end my days at the end of this boot. Anyway, I'm not after frog confessions because I feel they'll all end in the same way. But farming confessions, sleeping in too late confessions.
Yes.
They're all very welcome. If yours is the funniest, you get a smart speaker, and this is where you send it. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Well, it's confession time, and here we go. It's 50 quid for...
50 quid it
50
was.
quid, really? Amazing. For a cabbage and everything. Yeah. Confession time, yours please. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If it's the funniest of the week, then you get the smart speaker. Max sends in today's. Thank you, Max, Father Simon, and the Compassionate Collective. Confession for which I would like to seek forgiveness takes us back to the mid to late 1980s and my hometown of Dorchester, where the only sensible social option open to us all was to frequent the numerous inns, taverns and bars of the town. Genuinely, Father Simon, there was nothing else to do in this beautiful old Roman town. As time moved on, our little circle of friends was soon to relocate to an alternative, more centrally located hostelry, which I'm going to call the Crossroads Hotel. It's not the Crossroads Motel, it's Crossroads Hotel.
Oh, right.
There were 2 bars at the Crossroads. The main bar was a lounge bar. barber jackets, tweed caps, shooting sticks, G&T being swilled by the pint with a little finger sticking up in the air.
Yeah.
Matt's kind of place. Definitely not the place for our group of snake-bite and Bacardi-loving rock and roll rebels. Oh no, however, this establishment had a dark side. A place where anything goes. A sticky vinyl-covered floor and nicotine-stained wallpaper. This was the public bar. This was our HQ, our base camp. In truth, we were a very easily pleased bunch. A couple of pints of Royal Oak Best Bitter, my favourite, a game of darts, and most importantly, good music blasting out from the good old-fashioned jukebox, and contentment was guaranteed. The jukebox wasn't a Wurlitzer or anything glamorous like that, but it was mechanical, had a proper vinyl singles thing, you know, the ones where you had to pop out the spigot in the middle to make the bore bigger work. That miracle of modern engineering is a beauty. There was one slight problem, however. If it ever came to pass that we'd all run out of funds and the chosen music stopped, the monstrous machine, which was about the size of a double chest freezer, would start to play a default selection of tunes all by itself. It is our belief that our host, the most affable character named Roy, had made some kind of deal with the engineer who serviced and maintained this machine to ensure that the first tune played in this situation was always dueling banjos. We hated dueling banjos. Torture, I tell you, for ears more accustomed to Quo, Queen, Foreigner, Rainbow, Sabbath, Deep Purple, AC/DC, and so on. Do we want the banjos? No, we don't. Now, whilst the jukebox itself, with all the mechanical analog gubbins, was located in the public bar, the knobs in the lounge bar were also furnished with a wall-mounted panel from which they too could pay and select the music of their choice. We weren't having that. We did not want to listen to Kylie and Jason, Renee and Renata, or the Goombay Dance Band, or any of that namby-pamby garbage the knobs may happen to select. Fools! Something had to be done to protect our environment. I'd worked out that underneath the aforementioned sticky vinyl floor covering, and hence underneath our jukebox, was a very springy wooden floor. Father Simon, it didn't take me long to find the sweet spot, the perfect spot in the public bar's floor to undertake the smallest of double-footed jumps to achieve the reaction we required. The strange thing was that the sweet spot was surprisingly distant from the jukebox itself. It was perfect. We had discovered that we were able to derail the stylus straight to the end of the single currently playing if we didn't like it from a distance of 25 feet, simply by making an easily disguised little jump, while standing nowhere near the machine. We could even use this little trick whilst the landlord or the engineer was standing looking at the machine, as the sweet spot was far enough away not to arouse suspicion, and someone all the way over there couldn't possibly have anything to do with it, could they? Well, thank goodness, order would be restored to our audio entertainment, and any rubbish that polluted our slightly metallic musical environment could be disposed with maximum efficiency by us. And it was every day for about 6 years, including Christmas and bank holidays. Father Simon, I feel the time has come to seek forgiveness from the knobs who wasted their 50p's wanting to listen to Bucks Fizz.
Bucks Fizz!
Or Fern Kinney, or the St Winifred School Choir. Actually, I'd have to say, I quite like Fern Kinney. I also quite like Bucks Fizz, but anyway.
Okay.
I also seek forgiveness from the jukebox service engineer, who was a regular attendee to this particular machine. Despite all the tilt testing he undertook to ensure his machine had a sufficient degree of shock absorption, he never did get to the bottom of the cause before it was replaced by those confangled compact discs.
He's done it again! Oh, come on!
2 out of 2. I have to practice this for days. I also seek special forgiveness from George and Aretha, as their duet, I Knew You Were Waiting for Me, came in for regular treatment from us, so that the stylus actually destroyed the single, to the extent that we no longer needed to jump to end it. 6 notes, zip, finish. Sorry, George. Sorry, Aretha. I also seek forgiveness from pub landlord Roy, probably long gone by now, for all the inconvenience he encountered calling out engineers, fending off complaints, invariably only from his lounge bar customers, but feel that he too should shoulder partial blame for this whole grubby affair due to the detrimental effect of the banjo, because that is what started it. And that is from Max, no longer in Dorchester, but now residing somewhere near Salisbury. Okay, so Max and a jukebox confession. Sister Susie from the pub, who probably has some serious interest in this one.
Yeah, no, not forgiving. I think it's terrible. It would have cost the landlord money to get that engineer out to fix it. And that's the whole point of having a jukebox, is that you get a mix of music for the people that are in there, which is the reason why we don't have a jukebox in my pub.
Think of other
play
people.
what I want to listen to.
Oh, I see.
Not a jukebox, so we play our music. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. But there was a jukebox to have the mixture, therefore should have let it go. No. Not forgiven.
Yes, narrow-minded
Max.
Max might be in for a bruise in here, but let's
seen
check
the
in
side
with...
of Susie tonight, haven't we? We've all seen that. Right, what are you doing in a rural pub having dueling banjos? We all know what that meant in Deliverance.
Yes.
Goodness me. Goombay Dance Band. I'm going to forgive just because Goombay Dance Band have been mentioned in this confession. Also, 2 key changes in 2 days. Imagine the anticipation for tomorrow's confession. All the pressure that's going to be on tomorrow. So, yeah, definitely forgiven.
Okay, people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Max? Yes or no? On the text, please. 61054. 61054. First word has to be Simon. Forgiven, yes or no? Merely moments ago, today's confession, which came in from Max, about how they jumped at a particular place in the pub, and it made the jukebox jump, so they got rid of all the tracks that they didn't like. I'm wondering if there are any other jukebox-based confessions.
Definitely.
Well, anyway, the people's verdict is in, and here it is.
Jamie from Packham says, completely unforgiven. You can't make a jukebox skip a song just because you don't like it. Other people have a right to some jukebox music too. Maria in Gosport says, forgiven. AC/DC and Boston any day of the week. Now could you do the same with tellies that play football? Andy says, as someone who had to put up with Rainy Night in Georgia being played incessantly on the jukebox in my local, definitely forgiven.
It's a great song.
Fair enough. But Ian in Sidcup says, not forgiven. There's a special place in hell for music snobs where they have to listen to Goombay Dance Band for eternity.
Yes, I kind of agree with that.
Yes.
Anyway, if you have a confession and yours is the funniest of the week, you get the much loved smart speaker. Anyway, send in your confession. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Leave it because confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk is the email address where you can send your tale. If it's the favourite of the week, then you get a smart speaker.
Wow.
Imagine that. People's verdict expected on today's confession, which comes from John. Thank you, John. Father Simon and the deadly duo. Your failure to correctly guess the On This Sporting Day in History challenge
yes,
and confuse the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles with the 1988 Olympics in Seoul brought back memories, Father Simon, of a personal misdemeanor which haunts me to this day, and which could easily have had terrible consequences.
Wow.
So you were the start of this.
Yeah.
I attended the Seoul Olympics, says John, as a spectator to watch my wife, who was competing for Team GB. I won't tell you her name to spare her from embarrassment and to keep me out of the divorce court. Suffice to say, she came fourth.
Okay.
And still gets irritated when our grown-up daughters remind her that fourth is, quote, the worst place to finish.
Oh, right. Okay.
With some annoyance, she responds that it's better than fifth.
Quite right.
And better than not going to the Olympics at all.
Absolutely right.
Yes,
Absolutely
so I think,
right.
John, I think your wife is completely correct. Anyway, before I go further, I need to set the global scene at the time of the 1988 Olympics. There was trouble in Afghanistan. North Korea was pointing its missiles at South Korea, and the USA and Russia, or the USSR, as it was known then, ask your parents, were at loggerheads. Seoul was the first Olympics since 1976 that neither the USSR or the USA had boycotted. So as a consequence of all of that, what was going on in the world, security at the Games was very, very strict. There were hundreds of security guards on every street and at every event. Although they had nice smiley faces, they also had guns. Very large guns that almost certainly fired very large bullets. Spectators like myself were warned to behave and follow the rules to avoid getting into trouble. So I dutifully cheered on my wife and took the chance as she came fourth, and took the chance to watch plenty of other top-class sport. As the games drew to a close, happily without any of the security problems that had been feared, I decided it would be good to watch my wife in the closing ceremony. But sadly, I didn't have a ticket. However, on the off chance of getting hold of one, I arrived at the stadium a few hours before the ceremony was due to start. But at the last minute, I managed to persuade a gullible ticket tout to accept an unsigned traveller's cheque.
We are back in the 80s.
Remember them? For a ticket in the upper echelons of the stadium. And so in I went to take my seat. The ceremony duly came and went, lots of speeches and dancing and merriment and fireworks. Then the Olympic flame, which had previously fried a few doves at the opening ceremony, was extinguished.
Yes.
Now, I should also add that, of course, these were the days before mobile phones and email, so my wife had no idea that I was there in the stadium. Those nice, smiley security men with the big guns were now forming a human barrier behind which the athletes were filing out of the stadium, along a concourse and down a ramp to a car park where a fleet of buses were waiting to take them back to the high-security athlete village. Spotting a gap and determined to see my wife, I somehow and very foolishly slipped through and found myself walking with some of the athletes back to the buses. I can only assume that since I was not in a tracksuit or wearing a medal, that the guards and spectators must have assumed I was, I don't know, the only athlete from an obscure country. So I joined in the fun and I started waving back at everybody. Now, anyone with half an ounce of sense could have realised that this wasn't going to end well, but I felt that all would be fine when I reached the parking area. Then, to my horror, instead of having the chance to mingle in the car park with my wife whilst waiting for a bus, I was directed immediately onto a bus.
Yeah.
Well, what could I do? To turn back or to admit I was a spectator risked arrest, or worse still, being shot. So, on balance, in a bit of a daze, I followed orders and I climbed on the bus. I took a seat near the back and watched as the other athletes, who were clearly from Team USA, also took their seats next to me. The final straw was when none other than Carl Lewis climbed on board my coach. This is when it finally dawned on me that getting arrested inside the athletes' village with Team USA risked a diplomatic incident that would almost certainly have involved police, prisons, embassy staff and guns. I decided this would be a good time to pretend I did not speak English and stood up to make my way out of the bus. I nodded and smiled at Carl Lewis. All right, mate.
All right, Carl.
And then slowly made my way off the bus into the car park and back up the ramp against the direction of all the athletes.
Oh, again.
It strikes an ominous tone. Ignoring the gesticulations from the guards, all was going well until I reached the big commander at the top, who was clearly much better than his men at spotting a random spectator in amongst a group of highly trained Olympians. He pointed and shouted at me and pointed his gun, then instructed his men to get me. So I ran. I ran very fast. In fact, even a steroid-fueled Ben Johnson would have found it hard to catch me. Now, here's a top tip, Father Simon. If you ever want to disappear into a crowd, it's easy to do so when there are 80,000 people all leaving a stadium at the same time in the dark. An hour or so later, I got back to the apartment where I was staying, safe and sound and mightily relieved to be spending my night there rather than a cell or dead.
Yes! What a lucky boy.
With a big Korean bullet in my head.
Wowzer.
So I need to plead forgiveness for this act of Olympian stupidity that has haunted me for over 30 years. I don't want forgiveness for using a traveller's cheque to get the ticket from the town. He will have made enough money. And my wife has already forgiven me for not meeting her after the ceremony. However, I do plead forgiveness for almost certainly getting the smiley security guards, excuse me, with the very big guns into serious trouble with their commander, as I'm sure they will have been reprimanded for failing to anticipate that anyone could be quite as daft as the Brit. Nice fade, Simon. Quite as daft as I was. Yours in forgiveness. I'm emotionally carried away.
Yes.
John, who you would imagine in a later Olympic Games might have ended up in incredible danger.
Yeah.
Because we don't like people who do that. Anyway, let's check in with Sister Susie.
Danger. I don't really know what an unsigned traveller's cheque means. Like, do you have to sign it for it to be valid?
Yes.
Is that where
You're
it is?
so young.
Wow.
I use traveller's checks. I never used them. They were used around me. Just don't know what they are.
Your grandparents.
Now, I would be, I just can't believe all of this happened. It's not really your fault, but maybe you shouldn't have got on the bus, but I'm going to forgive you because, nothing bad happened.
Brother Matthew.
Quite a lot of geopolitics in this, which
Yes.
I enjoyed. I'm going to forgive because you are unbelievably lucky, John, because that could have gone south very. There's a lot of risk here for not much reward, given that all you did was you managed to wave at some people and didn't even meet your wife. So I'm going to forgive because that is the most amazing story I've heard from the Olympics.
Yes, and it could, you absolutely could have ended up in prison. No question about that. But do you forgive John, yes or no? People's verdict, please. On the text now, what you do is you send it to 61054. First word is Simon, guilty or not?
Why aren't you at the Olympics?
Yes. Anyway, then John, kind of getting away with it enormously, found himself on the Team USA bus alongside Carl Lewis, and he didn't end up in prison. Anyway, the people's verdict is in, and it's like this.
So Lewis in Manchester says, forgiven, great story. There was a 90s baby. What's a traveller's check? Ian in Renfrewshire says, not forgiven. He missed his chance to get an autograph from Carl Lewis. Presume selfies were not a thing back then.
You think?
And, no, they weren't. And finally, forgiven. I'd give that confession a gold medal if I could. Has to have been his personal best, and that's from Limford.
Do you, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Limford. Actually, yes, that's happened before.
Okay.
Back in the day. Had a comment from Limford, and it turned out to be Limford.
Yes, it was. Yes, I do remember that.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So it just occurs to me that there may well be some confessions about being in the wrong place at the wrong time,
Uh-huh.
where you don't have the right accreditation or you've blagged your way somewhere. There are many tales like this, and if you have one, we would like your confession. Maybe you've got an Olympics confession.
Yes.
Maybe the bigger and more exciting, the better.
Not criminal.
Obviously, no laxatives and no criminality. These are the basic rules, and no frogs. Thank you. By which I mean the animals.
Obviously,
Yes,
of course. That's
not
what you
submarines. Come on. It's confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Did I get away with that? No, I didn't get away with that. Okay. 30 minutes to 6 o'clock. It's confession time. So gather round, and the people's verdict will be due very shortly. Because that's what you do. You text 61054 once you've worked out whether there is any forgiveness on offer, yes or no. Brother Matthew's just shuffled in.
Yes, I have.
And Sister Susie's very busy producing the show,
I
trying
am.
to sort Nigel out with his lack of Wi-Fi.
Oh, no.
Anyway, we've got his food, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Matt can just read out his script, and then that's fine. So tonight's confession comes from Ronnie. Thanks, Ronnie. Father Simon of the Confessional Collective. By the way, Ronnie gets the smart speaker. Well done, Ronnie, already. My confession is about something that happened in the early years of my career with a very well-known shipping company. I was sent to join one of the company ships as a temporary extra hand to become familiar with the way they operated before being assigned my permanent ship. A period of on-board acclimatization, getting my sea legs and so on, understanding the traditions of the ship and its crew. Just like on the BBC TV series Vigil, but without the murders.
Oh, right.
And also without the conspiracy, and also without Saran Jones. And also not underwater, obviously.
Okay, so not very much
not
like
actually
Not really.
very similar.
Oh.
We sailed from port, and I'm wandering around, doing my best to familiarise myself with the layout of the ship and impress the captain with my keenness. I walked past a very nice wood-panelled room area. It said officers to me, classy. It said executive. I noticed what seemed to resemble a large mouse hole in one of the panels. That seems a little bit odd on a ship. On closer inspection, there appeared to be a large rodent poking its head out. No, you're imagining it, I told myself. It's new job nerves. You're hallucinating. And that's not great, is it, so early on in the job? Had I been on the lamb's rump, as advertised by the woman in the ill-fitting wetsuit? No, I had not. I looked again, and yes, there was definitely a rat's head poking out of this hole. I summoned up all my inner courage. I got closer before swiftly launching my boot in the direction of the large rodent head. A swift kick to the chops would be an impressive achievement. How many kills on your tour of duty, Ronnie? 1, albeit a rat.
Yeah.
However, I then realised that, surprise, surprise, it actually wasn't a live scary beast, but a stuffed toy, a genuine stuffed rat made in China. Well, I dragged it out, still very curious as to why it was there in the first place, in its own hole, and intending to ask one of the regular crew about my strange find. Unfortunately, I bumped into the captain. who inquired how I was finding things, to which I replied, well, what a fine, Captain. What a fabulous ship it is, and so well run. Nice beard. But
Really?
I found this.
Wow.
And I held up the stuffed Roland rat toy. He laughed rather loudly, but in a still captainly, very jolly, but Admiral of the Navy kind of way, however that sounds.
Yeah.
This wasn't the reaction I expected. Then he said, oh, you found Roland. He's the ship's mascot, and he's been on here 8 years since the ship was built. He brings luck, he brings good fortune and prosperity to everybody. Sailors, as you know, are very superstitious, so we are very fond of him. You found him, now it's your turn to hide the blighter. So off I went, determined to find the best hiding place ever for the little furry guy. I opened a cupboard, or locker as I believe they're known on a ship, and inside there was a large open-ended pipe. Right, Roland, my little stuffed friend, you're going up there. I began to push Roland up the pipe, intending to leave this little rodent with its head sticking out, when to my horror there was a loud sucking noise, and he disappeared. He disappeared up the pipe and was gone. Now I'm in full panic mode. I've been on this ship 1 day, and I've lost the much-loved mascot who's been there 8 years. Thinking on my feet, I sprinted up the stairs to the next level, or deck, I believe, as it's known nautically. Can tell you've got your sea legs. Yeah. And there's a room with a sign above the door saying, fan room. And this was where Roland had been sucked into. All would be well.
Oh, no.
But on opening the door, my relief was short-lived. Roland wasn't there waiting to be gathered after his thrilling ride up the pipe. Instead, the room was full of a haze-like cloud consisting of millions of tiny particles of sponge and fur. Roland had been vaporized. He'd been turned into a gas. He'd gone through the fan system, and this is what had happened. I rapidly closed the door, scurried away, hoping no one else would bother to look in there, a bit like they do in the Saran Jones drama. Yeah. The next day, the banter started with, where's Roland? You must have hid him well. I've been looking. Because that's how sailors talk.
Yeah.
Yes, I have thought. I had hidden it very well, was what I was thinking. Anyway, this continued for a while. Not long after, Father Simon, I was transferred, leaving the rest of the crew still expecting to come across their faithful, trusty mascot hidden somewhere. Worries were beginning to be expressed, I have to say. Concerns for the well-being of the crew and the ship itself. Superstition was beginning to take over. Everyone was looking, everyone was on edge. I pretended all was well and that I'd just been extra cunning. The coxswain guessed, I think, but couldn't prove anything.
How very like. Yeah, anyway, go on.
But just like in Vigil.
Yeah.
But now seems like the right time to confess to the captain and the crew. I'm sorry, Roland isn't still in hiding. He has become a million tiny particles of nylon and polyester. But, Father Simon, we are all made of stars, aren't we?
Aren't we, though?
So that's okay, then. I'm sorry if you thought your ship was going to sink because the fairy blight had been chopped up, but it didn't, so that's okay. In a way, he was still on board the ship. In a way. In a way. Just in lots and lots of different places. So you won't be finding him anytime soon. That's what I'm saying, says Ronnie. With tonight's winning confession, let's go to Sister Susie first of all.
Oh, Ronnie, how unlucky could you be? Like, the one place you find you think is amazing, and he just gets ripped to shreds, and he's been there for 8 years. I just think it's really unlucky. You maybe should have told them, but I'm going to forgive you, because it wasn't your fault.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, it got all a bit crystals and ley lines at the end there, didn't it? With the, is it in a way, isn't he? Isn't he still with us? Aren't we just all made of stars? And he is a gas. And I suppose the gas, that's still with us. So I'm going to forgive. Rat up a pipe always gets forgiveness in my book. So yeah, and he's hidden, so you're not supposed to see him. So that's
exactly
the whole point.
Right. Okay,
so it's all fine.
People's verdict, please. 61054. Do you forgive Ronnie? Yes or no? You start your message with Simon. 61054. Now for the people's verdict on tonight's confession. Merely moments ago, though, Fast Frank's confession was all about not realising that the Austrian hotel that he was staying in had doors that went the other way. Anyway, he got locked out. He was rude to the Germans who were in there, and he needed some forgiveness, and this is what came in.
So Andy Riley says, this has to be one of the funniest ever, but I can't forgive. As an experienced skier, Frank should have been aware of the doors. Furthermore, how did he get out, if not through the outward opening door? Of course. Marion says, forgiven, push-pull, was ist das? Hilarious, could have happened to anyone. And finally, Auntie B says, hi Simon, tell Matt that the German for push-pull is drucken ziehen.
Obviously.
Lol.
There you go. Okay, so we now have to decide which our favourite confession is of the week, because that's how we're going to allocate our smart speaker. So Monday was Barty. That was the loose sock that turned out to be the dead frog.
Yes.
Next up, it was Max with the jukebox jump. Then it was John and Team GB at the Seoul Olympics, but he got himself on the Team USA bus alongside Carl Lewis.
Amazing.
And today's was Fast Frank and the German couple in Austria. Sister Susie from the pub.
I think my favourite was that there was Mondays, was the frog, the sock
Barty.
frog.
You're going to go for the frog. I was pretty impressed by the getting onto the Team USA bus, I have to say.
It's all about sport.
Olympics.
Yeah,
All about
you-
sport.
Always
You picked
about
the sport one.
Well, I'm
Casting vote, go on.
going to go for Barty as well. I'm going to go for the
Wow.
for the loose sock that turned out to be a dead frog. So Barty, you get the smart speaker, and if you have a confession for us for next week, we would love it. Please, confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.